All right, looks like we have enough people here. Am I good in the back? Yeah, everyone can hear me? Awesome. All right, welcome to your Brewery Financial Toolkit. This is a crash course in financial KPIs, and we'll talk about those to guide your brewery to better profitability. How's everyone doing this morning? Good? All right. I am a musical theater performer, so I might ask for a little bit more energy in the group. How are we doing this morning? All right, that's what I like to hear. Thank you. All right, who am I? I am Julia Grubbs. I'm a CPA, and I am a brewery consultant with Small Batch Standard. We sometimes go by SBS, so if you've heard of us that way. SBS is the premier financial agency for the craft brewing industry. We've been serving the industry for over 11, 12 years. And we help breweries drive the bottom line, right? That's growing profits, right? We do that through outsourced accounting, tax, compliance, and then overall financial benchmarking and consulting. I live in New York City. I live in Manhattan. I'm originally from Kentucky. Found my way to the brewing industry through kind of a weird path, and I think some of y'all know that you come to breweries through different weird paths, and I think that's what makes it really cool and interesting that we all come from different things. So I am originally a professional dancer. I traveled the world and danced on cruise ships while studying for my CPA exam, and then kind of found fear through that. So, all right. So just a general question. Who here feels like they have full visibility into their brewery's financials and profitability? Oh, okay. All right, if we could get, I would say 50%, to say, yeah, you know what? I know what's going on. I know what I need to see. I would say we were doing pretty great. This is tough stuff, right? Running a brewery is really hard. But you need this visibility in order to make smart and healthy decisions. So it looks like we have some room to grow, which is awesome. All right, so some learning objectives for today. What we're going to talk about, we're going to start to understand the profit centers and the cost centers of your brewery, right? Where is the money coming from? Where's the profit coming from? We're going to learn the key financial metrics that you got to know to make those decisions that we were talking about. We're going to explore how to build your key performance indicators. Those are your KPIs and what those are and why they are unique to your brewery. And then we're going to touch on the overall state of the industry a little bit and discuss which benchmarks drive the bottom line. And then we'll talk about two different business cases where you can just do some quick math and be able to see, is this a smart decision for my brewery? So can I have a show of hands? Do we have more brewers in the industry? Just if you're a brewer, go ahead and raise your hand. Awesome. Okay. Do we like dealing with numbers, our brewers? Yeah. Okay, that's nice. What about owners, operators? Awesome. Lots of those. I figured we'd have a lot of those. Okay. As I said before, running a brewery is hard-ass work. And I think you know that, probably. But why is it so difficult, right? Breweries are multiple businesses in one. So you think about just maybe a manufacturer. All they do is manufacture. It's a little bit easy to just focus on that one thing and do that one thing really well. But breweries have a lot going on. You've got your tap room, your retail business. You've got your manufacturing. You've got your consumer packaged goods. And then sales and distribution, right? And you have to master all of these in order to be a successful, i.e. profitable brewery. Right, so I said the tap room and the retail and the wholesale and inventory manufacturing. Logistics as well is another business center if you're in self-distro. And then these last two are more important in the past few years. We've got e-commerce and then contract brewing. Right, we have clients with Shopify and their own apps or outside delivery. So do you have the right processes in place to see visibility into each of these systems and be able to see if they're profitable? And then contract brewing as well has been a lot more important in the past few years, just with the excess capacity that's out there. All right, so of those business centers, which are profit centers and which are cost centers? So your tap room, retail, your wholesale, your e-commerce, and your contract brewing, right? That's where the money is coming in. With each of our clients, we're looking into each of these centers and analyzing how they're performing. Are they profitable? What's losing money? What's not? And I think that's going to be more important in the coming years, is just really diving into each individual business unit and seeing if it's profitable. And that's what we do a lot with our clients. Yeah. Then we have our cost centers. So not only do you have to look at each of these profit centers, you have to be able to manage the costs. You have to manage the inventory and the logistics and the manufacturing. Right, so the processes have to be managed, but also the overall expenditures and whether what you're doing is actually making money or losing it. Right, for the past decade at SBS, we have mostly been focused on profit centers. It's been increased revenue at all costs, right? The boom was there, the revenue was coming, so we would just do that. But now, more recently, we've focused on both sides, right? You have to manage the inventory, manage the labor, and we hope that the marketing and promotion efforts that we're doing lead to more revenue and lead to more people in our tap rooms. But what we can control is the expenses and the costs. So we had a client, either they needed to double their revenue or cut their expenses by half, right? Those are hard asks. So to be able to look at both sides and be able to see what can we do on each side of that equation to be able to get that desired outcome. All right, so let's start with margins, right? These are your typical gross margins per the three profit silos, the three profit generating silos of a brewery. On the taproom side, you are keeping 80 cents for every dollar sold. You look over at the wholesale, 20 cents for every dollar sold. And then contract brewing, if it's priced correctly, and that's an important part, is 50 cents for every dollar sold. That's a 2.5 times increase on wholesale. And then taproom is a 4 times gap. So with all the challenges over the past year and a half, right, which end of the scale do you want to focus on? And I think this was really relevant to what Bart was saying earlier, is we know what's profitable, are we going to focus on that? And where do we have the opportunities? It's important to get to your specific margins for your beers and for your brewery, but with all the data that we've come up with over all of our clients, we know that you probably won't be far off from these. And I do want to say that in wholesale, these are what we see in all distribution, and we believe that with the logistics and delivery costs that come along with self-distribution, that your margins will normalize out to be the same. And I'm seeing some head nods that, yeah, that's probably the case. So what does this tell us, right? Distro is valuable in getting your name out there, but without the tap room, your profits are going to be slimmer. And that's just the way it is. All right. So how do we get to those margins? Our gross margin is our net revenue less COGS, and our revenue is going to be total revenue less discounts. Then what do we include in our COGS? And this is the SBS definition of COGS. And we get a lot of questions sometimes as, oh, why don't you include this, or why don't you include this? And you could, but the margins would then just be lower, right? So this is what across all of our 60 to 70 clients that we have across the US, this is what we include in COGS. What is that? The cost of beer sold, that's whatever is coming out of your brewery management software, of what goes into the beer, right? That includes WIP loss, inventory adjustments, and taproom transfers. And you'll see that those are similar to the ECOS chart of counts. We like ECOS, we like what they do, and we like how it comes across on the accounting side. We also include excise taxes, and then things that are difficult to attach to a single batch, brewery expense, yeast, chemicals, and gas. Those get expensed at the time and then are included in COGS. And then we also include merchant fees. And so that note down at the bottom, right, this lets you know how much you have to pay all the other expenses. We call that the gap. That's the gap between gross profit and then net profit or net income. And then you also have to note the margins for each of the income generating business functions, so, right? So that's splitting your taproom, splitting your distro, e-commerce, all of those things. You want to know the margins for that to know if that is actually profitable or not. So let's get into the margins in distro. So these are the margins that we see per packaging SKU in a distro. In a half barrel, we're seeing anywhere from 20 to 30%. Sixtels at 50% plus. And then 12-ounce cases, 25 to 35, and 16-ounce, 40 to 50. Right? We look at individual beers and be able to see which beers are profitable and which are not. You know, we had a client a few years back, and we were able to tell them, hey, on this specific product and this specific packaging type, you are losing money every time this goes out the door, right? That's a really valuable tool to be able to say, okay, we need to change what's going out the door to distro.
Julie, you know, this
Yeah.
50%. I mean, how do people in the room think that is right? Because I'm not calling out. For us, the six, most of the customers want to buy at a third price of what they buy at Kenny. So we don't see anywhere near 50% margins. Now, Saranac is more broad stream brand. But, you know, if you're selling a keg for $200, you know, the six will, we're just going to sell it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think with some of at least the recent customers we've done margin analyses for, we are seeing 45 to 49. You know, if it's not a super expensive beer to make, and that can change too. And that's why, you know, you do want to look at these per individual beers and know that some beers are going to be different or lower than others, for sure.
I just build on something else you said, is that if you go back to that slide, and I'm a huge proponent of sell everything you can in your tap room before you move out. When that was 80 cents on the dollar. And Julia, I think, very well showed that, you know, our business is complicated. And so the more you simplify and stay focused, I'm a huge believer in focus. Stay focused on the area of your business where you make most margin. So you get into distribution and all these other things that you're going to run through. That becomes the diversion of what you can get done. And so that, you know, we laid this out perfectly is, you know, where you can focus on the 80%, I'm going to say that's going to drive all of our businesses much better than doing distribution and merchandise and all this other stuff that can pull you out and bring to the profession.
Yeah, definitely. And there are so many, you know, as we said, different profit generating silos, but having that focus and concentration on one, that i.e. hopefully the most profitable one, will help. And my example for the sixtels was really that you can charge more for sixtels because customers are buying smaller quantities, and that's similar to, you know, same reason why margins are higher for Coke or Pepsi when you buy a small bottle versus a 2-liter. Yeah.
So that seems, the 16-ounce cases seems like the profit margin on that is way high. With all the, like, are you counting the labor in, you know, not only the canning, but the labeling, all those costs and stuff coming up with that?
Yeah, so we do, I would say sometimes we'll see maybe on that lower end of 40, or reaching 40. I wouldn't say maybe recently I've seen as much with that price of can costs and stuff going up. And I think you'll see on my next slide just about the prices in the margins in distro are going to be just harder to achieve with rising costs, but we do build in portions of labor and overhead as well to get these margins. Right, and so to further on that, right, we know that the taproom is and has always been just great. It's the most profitable, and we know that. Contract brewing is also more appealing than it's been. You may want to consider brewing lagers for other breweries, right? It'll free up their tank time, and if you do that, you have flexibility to say, hey, this is what we need it to look like. We'll eat up our own take time, that's fine, but here's how we can do that, right? And then, as we said, Sixtals is the most profitable SKU in distro, and we're seeing that kind of across the board. And that note, how do we keep FOB is in range to maintain the margins that we're looking for in distro, right? And I said down there, the distro margins are going to be harder to achieve with rising costs, and that's kind of another further reason to focus on that tap room, right? We know pricing pressure in the tap room is awesome, and it has kept up, but in distro, it's not awesome, right? It's in everyone's best interest to continue to offer wholesale beers at a respectable price. You guys don't have the logistics that the big guys do, right? Craft cannot win on price, and you must maintain our pricing. All right, let's get to key performance indicators or KPIs. I had told someone last night when my talk was going to be on, and I foolishly said, just KPIs, and they said, what is that? Key performance indicators. So really, just what is that? If you were alone on a deserted island, right, what stats would you need to know whether your brewery has won the week? Right, it gives you a snapshot of how the business is doing. So what are KPIs? They're numbers that you should know off the top of your head to know if your business is doing well. Ideally, you want 6 to 15. You want to track them weekly. And they should be controllable, right? Someone should be able to have ownership over them. If no one controls it, then guess what? It's not going to change. So you have to be able to take action when not on track, and it should tie to your strategy and forecast. It should fit your brewery like a glove, right? So you want examples of what other breweries are doing, but you want to really tie it to your vision. And in order to come up with these, you want to look at the different balanced scorecard areas, right? So your customers, your employees, your processes, and financials. So here are some examples across those different silos. Right, customers, social media engagement. Is it growing or is it not? Right, average check size. Are customers staying? Are they continuing to buy? Right, what does that look like? Your processes. Inventory levels, are they too low? Do you have to stop brewing in order to get something into the brewing management software because somebody didn't do that, right? How can you fix those? Employees, what does turnover look like, especially in this difficult labor environment? How long does it take a new person to be onboarded and trained? And then financial, right? What keeps you up at night? Maybe you just start with the cash balance. You know the cash balance Monday morning, and then you know the 5 largest outlays that are going to happen that week, whether that's inventory, labor, or rent. Right, those are going to be three of your biggest, right? So what's going wrong? You figure out what's going wrong. What can we do to get it on track? Try it, track it, but don't hold on too tightly. See if it's improving, and then if it's not, don't be afraid to change course. The most successful businesses adopt new strategies, but aren't willing to dispose of them. Right? That sunk cost fallacy of holding on too tightly to something we've spent so much time on. If it's not working, move on. And so these should be looked at weekly so that owners and leaders can touch on the financial health of the company. All right, so KPIs individual, they fit you like a glove, right? You develop those internally, and they're entirely customized to your business and your strategy. Benchmarks are different. They are an overall touch on the industry. So SBS started developing benchmarks over a decade ago, and Chris, our founder, started comparing the handful of breweries he had at the time and they said, we want to know how we're doing relative to other breweries. So he started comparing those with similar sizes, right? These produce 2,500 barrels a year to this one producing 2,500 barrels a year. And they said, we can't do that. This doesn't make sense for us. So then he looked at the age of a brewery, how long it had been around. That didn't work either. Then he started looking at those in the same geographical location, right? And that also didn't work. So now we focus on the dollar. We focus on where the income is coming from. So a brewery that has 90% of its revenue coming from tap room and 10% of its revenue from wholesale, it's going to be very different benchmarks than 10% of taproom and 9% wholesale. So we have dedicated benchmarks for each category along that split. Okay, so first we'll start with some ones that reflect everyone that's in it, regardless of your taproom distro split. We'll start with our taproom revenue per square foot. Total taproom revenue divided by your taproom square footage, that's your usable taproom square footage. An acceptable range here is 30 to 40, right? Are people coming in, are they staying and buying? Taproom revenue per barrel. This has been really important for us over the past year. That's going to be your total taproom beer sales divided by the number of barrels transferred to the taproom. An acceptable range here is 1,300 to 1,800, and we are seeing that increase a little bit up to about 1,500 kind of bottom. Right? It's increasing because you have pricing, you have flexibility in pricing in the taproom. Brew pub, food versus beer revenue split. So that's the percentage of food sales as compared to beer sales. We're aiming for 60% food to 40% beer, right? Why your pint is $7, $8, your food is going to be maybe about double, a little bit more than that, depending on the item. If you're falling more around 75 to 25, 75 food, 25 beer, maybe you have a beer problem, right? It may not be beer quality, but it may be your taproom staff isn't trained to push beer or to sell more beer. And the same thing with the opposite split, right? 25, 75, maybe you have a food problem. Maybe not food quality, but maybe, yeah.
So is that assumption that like they're just gonna buy like one meal, one beer? Or is that kind of what it's where I feel like they buy like maybe 2 or 3 beers?
Right. We see in total, because not everyone is coming and buying food, we still see that kind of 60-40 split. And then distro revenue per barrel, that's going to be your total wholesale revenue divided by wholesale barrels sold, and that range is going to be between 300 and 400. And for blended self-distro, 525 is what we're seeing there. So a question we get, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is why aren't the margins higher in self-distro? And that's because we think that logistics and fleet costs are going to bring our margins down to those comparable to regular using a distributor. So don't believe me, I'd love to run a margin analysis for you. So my email's on the last slide, and we can talk about that. Oh, and then this last one, taproom revenue to GM salary. Your monthly taproom revenue should be double the GM's annual salary. So GM salary is $40,000, taproom should generate $80,000 per month. And I would touch and say if you have someone that's maybe doing multiple roles, filling multiple roles, depending on how small, if you could take a portion of their time that's doing that, say 50% of their time is a taproom GM, 50% of that $40,000 is $20,000, and then the taproom should generate that $40,000 per month. All right, now we're going to get into the cost benchmarks of a 50-50 brewery, so that's 50% of its revenues coming from the taproom and 50% of the revenue coming from distro. And we'll get into a full kitchen in a minute. So the first one there is 39 to 45% of your wholesale draft sales should be your wholesale draft COGS. For packaging, 41 to 46% of wholesale package sales should be your wholesale packaged COGS. And then beer sales in the tap room, 5 to 11% of beer sales is going to be tap room beer sales is going to be your tap room beer COGS. Right? So why? We want to know, are your packaging costs too high in addition to having expensive beer? Do you need to switch vendors and lower costs? Are you transferring beer to the tap room on a regular basis in alignment with how much you're selling? Right? And then this total COGS number is 32 to 38% of total beer sales. And this has been super important for me recently, overall COGS, because the higher this goes, the less you're going to have for any other expenses, let alone earnings or net profit. Right, we have one client,
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
This came up yesterday. What price do you see, or how does the brewery charge the tap room? So what we do is we charge at the price the distributor would charge retail. Some people just charge the FOB price. And so what do you see in the cost?
Yeah, so we actually had someone come to us recently and said, I've done all this work to split out my production and my tap room, and they wanted to know if their production was going to be profitable. But they weren't licensed for distribution yet, and so we said, well, where's the revenue coming from for the production side? And they said, oh, we're selling it from the back of house to the front of house at cost. And so we said, well, if you sell it at cost, there's no way that the distro side can make any money. So we don't believe in selling to the front of the house. Ours is Ecos's process to taproom transfer, and it transfers at a cost and a $0 actually sold. Yeah.
So just, if it costs me $50, you just save $50 with that.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
So do you have in your company, do you do it separately, like separate books, like almost separate companies?
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah. So what we do is, like, in this area, we just do percent distributor. So if they sell a keg for $160, we would charge our tap room and brewery $160. So there's breweries, I mean, the breweries, we run the breweries at profit center, and so we also run that.
Yeah, and we usually, we don't see that. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so you're talking about COGS at 5-11% of the beer sales in the tap room, but previously you were saying that tap room was typically 80% margin. Is this just
Yeah, so this is just the cost of the beer. That's not including the excise taxes and merchant fees. That would be just the cost of the beer.
got it, thanks.
And what I was gonna say earlier is that their direct COGS benchmarks were online, their taproom beer sales cost benchmarks were online, but their total COGS were continually too high, right? That 32 to 38%. And so that's why we dug in and asked, what is the problem? And it turns out that their manufacturing loss was just too high, their WIP loss. And that's the benefit of these benchmarks, is that in coordination with all the others, you can quickly and easily identify the problem spots, right? Instead of just saying, hey, my overall COGS are too high, let's do something about that. You can say, cool, I know everything else is in line, and then what is not, right? All right, and then we'll get into labor. Outside sales, 8 to 12% of your wholesale sales. And that's your sales rep admin, and that's going to be any internal accounting, marketing, legal. 3 to 5% of total sales. And this is for the 50-50 brewery, the tap room, 8 to 12% of tap room beer sales. And production is 6 to 8% of total beer sales. In advertising, we recommend 3 to 5% of total sales. I will say we haven't seen a ton in the last 5 years really spending that quite much, really any more than 2. But this is what we recommend. And I do think this will be important in the coming years, just to continually bring in that taproom business. And then occupancy, 8 to 12% of total sales, and we define occupancy as rent and utilities. Everyone got photos if they need it, and I can send it to you after if needed. Yeah, do you have a question?
I don't know how broad this is, but we in New York City have triple net, so where do you count real estate taxes? Do you count that in occupancy?
Any
Or
triple net we
just-
usually include in the rent and utilities, so yeah, in the occupancy. Other taxes are separate and are part of our G&A accounts. All right, so this is going to be for a full kitchen. Right, in that example I was talking about before, who was trying to sell it for their to their front of house, but they were really a restaurant that makes its own beer. If you, less than 20% of your revenue is coming from outside sales, you are a restaurant that makes its own beer. And all of these are for a high minimum wage state, such as New York. But you're also charging a little bit more for the products and the food, so it narrows out a little bit. Okay, so back of house and front of house total 30 to 33% of food and bev sales, and that's going to include your GM, 2 managers at 5%, admin at 2, kitchen at 16, and servers and bartenders at 5. And once again, all of those are 5% of total food and bev sales. 16% of, as kitchen is 16% of total food and bev sales. And then that bottom part is same as before, outside sales, 8 to 12% of wholesale sales, and 6 to 8% of beer sales, total beer sales. Some other healthy benchmarks is our debt to asset ratio, and that's going to be anywhere from 0.3 to 0.5. That is your total long-term liabilities over your total assets, and just seeing, are you too leveraged, right? And then your earnings are earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. We call it EBITDA. That's going to be your net operating income on your QuickBooks if that's what you use. That's going to be anywhere for a 50-50 brewery, 6 to 12% of overall sales, right? So if you're earning $1 million in total sales over the year, 60 to 120,000 will be your earnings. All right, let's move on to just a couple of business cases, right? Back of the napkin. So can we say, hey, is this decision useful or not? The first scenario is just a new tank purchase, right? If you have the space and the utilities to add tanks and the demand to already fill them, so that's a kind of keynote into this, is, right, this is not, you have to add new people to do this. You have to sublease new space. This is if you have the existing infrastructure in place and you just are going to be producing more, it's a slam dunk to add them, right? Our scenario estimates that it only takes 5 months of production to pay for a new tank, and we just do that through a payback period. What does that look like? You've got a 10-barrel tank at $10,000, rigging and shipping at $4,000, and installing parts at $1,000 for a total cost of $15,000. And then what does that payback period look like, and how do we do that? So we assume, you can turn the tank every 14 days, and that's going to get you 26 batches a year. With a yield of 73%, that's going to knock out 8 barrels per batch. That's a total, at the bottom, 208 barrels per year. If we use that distro revenue per barrel that we were getting, that 325, and then a gross profit of $185 per barrel. So that $15,000 purchase, you're going to divide by the, so if you get, that would be 17 barrels a month also. So 17 barrels a month times 185 gross profit is going to get you 4.6 or 5 months, right? Another example, a question we get all the time is, how do we hire a sales rep and how do we pay them? Each market needs a rep. This keeps you top of mind and current and active in your market. So we recommend that salary plus commission, 8 to 12% of their annual sales. So if you expect an annual sales rep to be to get about $480,000 in sales, their total comp should be $48,000 or 10% of annual sales. And then with Sea Eagles, in self-gestro, we like to see 7 to 11,000. And then in with a distributor, that's going to be 20,000 plus. We have a pretty robust calculator, so if you email me at the end, I can send that to you, and that allows you to put in your FOBs and change the commission and change what you want it to see in order to find that 8 to 12%. Our founder has a podcast. It's called the True Craft Podcast. You can find it anywhere that you listen. As well, he has a long game roadshow, so he's going around the country talking about how breweries can focus on, that next 10 years that Bart was talking about, and really not get lost in the chaos of the day to day, and really try to focus so that you can stay around. We also have a newsletter, so you can just visit our website and join our newsletter. We're putting out content regularly, and I think it's really useful. Right, we know breweries are cyclical in nature. We had a decade-in boom of growth, as Bart was talking about. I love that talk. I thought it was super useful. I don't know about anyone else, but but that's all I have for you today. So my name is Julie Grubbs. That's my email if you want it, and I have some cards up here, and then any other questions that we can talk about.
How can we get this really informative presentation?
I'm sorry, say that again?
How can we get a copy?
Yeah, you can email me at Julia@SB Standard. So it's SB Standard. Yep.
I got a question, I mean, I don't know, I'm a little confused. The 20% on the wholesale level, then that we hire a sales guy at 12% commission, there's really nothing left.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's becoming more important as we are digging with our clients and separating out their distro sales from their tap room, and really seeing if the distro is profitable. And we are kind of finding in a lot of cases with everything that comes along with it that it's not as much as we thought.
I'll just beat a dead horse. If you stay focused in the tap room, that's a good one. So us, if I take our two businesses, so we have Saranac, obviously, we can get a case of beer off the line for $12 a case, but I'm producing 40,000 cases a day. So, yeah, if I'm making $7 a case, what I always say to people is $7 a pint is better than $7 a case. Keep in mind, you say, okay, but you're not listening to yourself. I'm doing 40,000 cases a day times 7. That's a big difference. Now, if we take our Flying Bison Brewery in Buffalo, our cost of goods there is about $18 a case, and our FOB is like $22. So I'm making $4 a case. I will tell you that if you're in the beer business or any smaller business, and you're not making 50%, 40% in commercial on your margins, we're going to be in trouble. And so that, to me, it's, again, everybody always wants to be with the app. Spend your time in the tap room, stay focused on the tap room, drive your business. I agree totally with what you say. Is my philosophy is always grow the top line, that's where all the money is. Stay focused on cost. Reducing the costs at the same time, you're going to be happy. And so that was great what you were saying. But again, it's everybody wants, don't listen to those people that say, I really wish I could buy your product at Wegmans or Price Chop or whatever. They'll buy it once, and then they won't buy it again. And no offense to anybody, but everybody buys IPAs, most promiscuous consumer out there. So they may love your IPA today, they'll love somebody else's tomorrow. So, just again, I can't tell you how many calls I get a week of people saying, we got too much debt, they put it all into equipment, I'm doing distribution. Stay focused on where the money is, and you'll be fine.
And I would just reiterate we had a client with a bunch of locations in the Pacific Northwest, and this past year, they really, I think it finally hit them. They were really just focusing on growing revenue, and then their costs got out of control, and when the revenue dipped, they were losing so much money. So yeah, they really had to tighten it down and tighten it down quickly, instead of kind of recognizing that it was happening it was growing all along, and then it got unsustainable. Yeah.
I think what you're saying about tap room sales, and that's what our business tries to focus on. Do you have any input on how do you view satellite locations for tap room sales, and maybe some distribution?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that the customer doesn't really need to see the beer being made anymore. They're more coming for the experience and just the ambiance of the place. So yeah, I would say that those are still great. If they're in a great location, then that's gonna do well.
Safe location, be family friendly, dog friendly, food. You know, we just put a beer garden in, we did tavern tours. You know, for years, everybody said, how come we don't have food, and you could order it across the street? People don't want that, they want food, right, what do they say? So now we put in food. You know, the number one thing is, what else do you have besides beer? Which is, it's a testament to where we're going, and you gotta deal with that. Because what I would say is 10 years ago, when crack was really hot, if you had 10 people and 6 people said, let's go to X brewery, the other 4 didn't have a voice. Today, those other 4 have a voice and say, I can't drink what I want to drink there, I'm not going. So you gotta listen to your customer and give your customer what you want. Again, satellite locations, I think we haven't done that, but if you have a good location and you can do it, and you can stay focused, so you're not spreading yourself too thin, it's probably worth it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've done exactly what Fred has done. We started out not having food in our tasting room. We did about $500,000 in net sales. Next year we added food. We went to 1.3 million. The following year, 1.5. We're probably going to do 2 this year, and I just applied for a liquor license. So that's exactly what it is. The revenue is being generated. It does more than the back office.
Yep.
You know, it really does. I mean, we understand our COGS and the rest of the stuff, but I just never thought that the tasting room would grow that fast.
Yeah. What Chris, our founder, always says is everyone has to eat, no one has to drink. Right? So food is just, it's very helpful.
And where food is almost exactly what you said those numbers were.
Yeah.
Food outsells beer.
Yeah.
Loren said it makes food there, and you don't have to deal with that shit. 'Cause I don't want to own a restaurant. I don't know food.
I didn't either.
I like eating.
I didn't either.
We looked into doing that, but it didn't seem practical.
You know, kitchen, I don't want to be in the food business. I didn't not want to do it. Everybody I talked to said you're going to give away more money, and depending on who you pick as your partner, could become a disaster. And so we went with, we own the kitchen, we own the chef, I don't own the employed chef.
You know, you don't ever
Kitchen out.
All right, so raise your hand. I guess I'll moderate this. Raise your hand if you own the food portion. Okay, and then raise your hand if you rent it out or lease it out. Okay.
How many people didn't want to do food but ended up doing food?
Okay.
No, I guess it counts as the other one.
That's what we've turned to, is just having a food truck every week that we can,
Yeah.
which
There's
still not the same.
What do you think? What to get it reliably?
Yeah, mainly in the summer and the warmer months, but it's still just, it just seems like it's not the same as just having a little, 12 by 12 room with some fryers. Like, you don't need much, but it seems like it matters.
And like how you say you don't want to be in the food industry, when you realize you're in the beverage industry, the food is a part of that. Like, you don't want to run a
It's
restaurant.
taken 2 years, but I think that's coming
Break down
around.
that.
I mean, you could get a food truck yourself, and it's your food truck outside. It's easier to get a health department code on your own.
That's
food
what
truck.
I'm like.
And that saves, now the money's coming back to you, even though it's just a food truck sitting outside, because food trucks are not reliable at all. They
Yeah.
decide, well, I had a better gig, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And that's on a Memorial Day
It's
weekend.
happened, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
One other thing in mind about the licensed property, the food truck cannot operate in your license. I mean, there has just been some change on it.
That's a
It
change.
can, no, it can. Food truck can operate on your licensed premise.
One.
One, is it just one?
One,
You used to be able to go to the SLA and draw a map and put it around it, and you say, okay, this is not area that we're gonna serve alcohol, and the food truck can go there.
Yeah, make your parking lot
Ways around
part of the licensed premises. And have it park there.
And I'll touch on that. We had a client, one of their locations, they still own and operate the food. The other location they did, and then it was constantly just losing money and too much of a headache. And so then they now subleased it out, and now that location is profitable now. So I think it just depends on, the location, the type of food that you have, right? We do really like to see those unique food pairings, right? We have a client with Thai fried chicken, I think, and something that pairs well with their beer. So it does depend on where you are and what type of food. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit to contribute to that. So we recently, you're doing pretty much 100% sales in the tap room. And to drive business, we brought in pizza. It was a friend of mine. And he did fine, but you notice I really focus on average price per customer. For me, that's my metric week to week. And I found that the pizza actually takes beer from you. Because think about it, if you're going there, you're eating pizza, you're not going to get another drink necessarily, right? Because you're full. You also have a budget. So I can choose $25 pizza or 4-pack to go home, or you spend my budget. So we're finding there's actually a substitution of that. So we're going to actually own the pizza on site.
We have every restaurant in our little town.
We're some food. Still don't get it, it's not gonna be.
Still don't order food.
And that's what they were
They
saying.
don't even believe it. It still shows up and they still don't get it. Like, well, guess we need food.
So, food outsells beer. What kind of profit margins on those top companies?
Less.
It's less. Right?
Less than 10.
Yeah.
10 months.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing food COGS at 30 to 36%. And if you let it go higher than that, then that definitely is an issue.
Yeah, so in some sense, you're taking for your 80% tap room and you're moving to a lower margin operator.
So that's the thing. Focus on what is profitable. And beer is so much easier, cheaper. So I always see it as a food leverages, you know, and brings them in the door. So it's not so much profit itself.
Yeah. But it brings more people.
Yeah.
And they stick around longer with
And
the food.
stay around.
And I'm not telling you we're right, but one of the things we don't do chicken wings. Everybody does chicken wings. We have a different menu so that
It's good.
the people will come and not, you get we don't have pizza. You can get pizza, you can get chicken wings, why from the menu?
You know, we've also found that music is a great thing because it's not a competitive product. Right? So you're coming and you're still spending on your beer. You pay for the music, you're not purchasing something else.
Yeah.
Have you done any deep diving into, like something else we talked about, like combine both food and beer, what the average ticket winds up being per person?
Yeah, I think we like to see it at least 2.5 times of the pint price.
Of the what, bro?
Of the pint price. Yeah.
So we just to answer that, ours indoors, we're doing about $22 per person. Is what we're getting this time.
We added food, we went from $16 to $24 per person. But we don't have food.
Yeah, what kind of food?
And, you know, that's another thing to add is that, yes, it might be a little lower margins on the food, but if you already have some of those existing costs in place and you don't have the high enough revenue to cover it, you're losing money. So you need that extra revenue, even if it's lower margin, to just cover those other costs that you already have.
Yeah, to be fair, so our margin per price per customer went down slightly, but the number of people went up more than it went down.
Yeah.
We had an average cost per ticket about for 33,000 people, or almost 34,000, about $45 a person.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
Let's trade.
I'm in nowhere land, so I mean, people come to us because and we open at noon, so we have a lunch crowd now too.
Yeah, where are you, sorry?
Upstate, way up by
North Hudson.
North Hudson, New York.
Okay. Any other questions? I am new to the outside of Manhattan brewery culture, so I would love to learn about all of you guys. And we actually don't have any other breweries specifically in New York. Yeah.
You worked, I'm a marketer, so your marketing costs were worked into your admin fees and seem to be a pretty low percentage, but of course, one of the reasons to go into distribution and retail is to, push awareness of your product. And so what are your thoughts on kind of the balance of marketing spend and, the make sure that you're not just in one place, right? The diversification of being able to find your customer, but still drive them into the time room where you're going to be making the most money, and kind of what are your thoughts? I mean, I think you were like less than 8% of your revenue that should be spent on marketing costs. In my mind, that's incredibly low, especially when you're talking about driving that consumer into your tap room where you want them to come back, right? Retargeting. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I go through this, is that I'm not a huge believer in the distribution models going to get customers. I think get the people into your place and do email marketing, social, etc., and give them a wow experience. If you wow them when they come, they'll bring more people. We have a loyalty guest thing, so like hey, this was a Firestone Walker. I left an hour later, I get this email, thank you for coming, here's $5 off the next purchase. I'd be working on those types of things and just wow the hell out of the customer when he's there, because that'll bring more people.
So you don't think it makes a big difference for you to have your product in a number of retail stores in terms of that customer kind of discovering you there and then coming to the tap room after?
And I have them, but I'm already there, so we're doing it backwards. What I would say is the cost of getting into distribution is higher than getting people to buy the product in your place and leaving with it, or margin, and then buying it in your place and leaving. Treehouse is set to be an unbelievable example. And they're doing 100,000 barrels, and their average barrel revenue is, they're doing 4-packs mostly at $20. And they're doing $8 a pint, and they're crushing it. So to me, Treehouse has established a model out there that it's killer. I'd follow it as much as you can.
Yeah.
Have you ever done any workup of small breweries and metrics for doing events that you would say, not just give out samples and sell?
Do you mean more hosting events, as in people renting out the tap room, or you hosting?
No, I mean like you go into the jockey box or the trailer and you're serving. And we do start in small festivals.
Yeah.
And usually right now we do jockey box and the trailer.
Yeah.
Just wondering if you got any metrics on that. Or
I mean, we would
seen that.
consider that in part of your advertising marketing spend, kind of. But no, I can't say. I would say we are having people push events in the tap room, right? Several places. Used to be hotspots for downtown locations, and people used to come for lunch, but there's no lunch people anymore. There's no lunch crowd because the office buildings aren't filled. That, renting out the tap room for any number of reasons is all profit. It's just getting that extra revenue on nights when you might not otherwise get it. Yeah.
I do a lot of offsite events. I did about 35 last year. I tell people I'll try anything once, but I've developed a number in my mind of how many people need to be expected to be there before I will show up, because it's usually a really good indicator of whether or not it's going to be a good event for me or not. That's kind of what I use to decide whether or not I'm going to go to an event. But you do end up going to some stinkers every year and finding out you're not going back.
Are you pouring the beer and charging those events?
Yes, and I'm building a tap trailer because my back hurts.
How are you licensing that then?
Well, you can get a one-time event permit from the SLA. Any location you can do twice a year. It costs like $35. You can have it in 2 to 3 weeks in advance. Yeah.
And one thing I'd say, make sure you're covered insurance-wise.
Yeah. No, I definitely included our activities.
Pouring versus somebody else pouring.
And most of the places we go, they'll require a certificate of insurance before we get there and things like that.
Yeah. Anyone else? All right, thanks so much. If you want my card or want to talk to me, thank you so much.